Thanks for coming on. So Thinsters, for the 3 people out there who don't know what Thinsters is.
Today we're going to talk about Thinsters, and I still think there's a big journey ahead of us to get a lot of people aware and trying Thinsters, which we're going to talk about a little bit more today. But Thinsters are bite-sized snackable cookies with tons of flavor. We have no artificial ingredients. We're non-GMO. We don't process with any type of corn syrup or hydrogenated oils. And we come in really fun snackable flavors: toasted coconut, key lime pie, brownie batter, 7 different flavors. So we're what we call a more of a modern type of cookie that's fun, flavorful, and also better.
I tried it yesterday. It's definitely thin, a bite, a lot, packed with flavor, like you said. You recently underwent a rebrand. You were Mrs. Thinsters. You dropped the Mrs. It worked for Mrs. Fields. Did their people come after you?
They might soon.
Talk to me a little bit about the impetus for, like, what was it that's you said, all right, Mrs. Thinsters not working, let's be Thinsters.
Sure. I think that if any company goes through a rebrand, it's one of the biggest, most important thing any company could do. And it all starts with insights first. So before you decide to embark on a rebrand, you have to really understand what's going on currently, why you would think about rebranding, and what people are thinking about when they see your product. We were really catered to a healthy consumer. Mrs. Thinsters, the branding of Mrs. Thinsters really spoke to healthy consumers, which is a smaller household penetration and a much lower buy rate. We saw a lot more success with brands like Halo Top, like Kind, like Unreal, like Crave, who spoke to a much larger household penetration with much more frequency in their buying behavior, and decided that strategy was more effective for how to get people to aspire to eat healthier. The second part of a rebrand, after you dive into insights, is getting a really tight positioning on what your brand should stand for. From there, we execute in terms of getting that positioning translated into a design. In other words,
back up on the positioning for a second.
Sure.
Here, because I always tell companies that, you know, your brand and your positioning is a function of the product, the culture within the company, and then the audience. What was the audience telling you specifically about your positioning that bubbled up into this new branding?
Sure. The positioning is, in my opinion, the strategy and the most important part of any rebrand. If you get the execution wrong, you can always tweak it, but you can't always tweak your positioning and strategy. We took a very scientific approach, and we looked across the category and what brands stood for, whether it was a warm sit-by-the-fire brand, or it was a gluten-free, we're the healthiest cookie brand out there, or we stood for your mom-and-pop shop type of cookie. We saw an opening, an opportunity, and a positioning that stood for fun, flavorful, snackable, and also better for you. That was the positioning that was the most open and had a white space in the category, while also being relevant to what our physical product was.
And many brands, there are certain cues from the category that you have to have. What did you see in the cookie category that you said, you know, everybody's doing this thing, and we need to do, these are like the table stakes for the brand, and then we can sort of iterate on top of that. Did you go through that process?
One thing that we noticed that was very obvious thinking after the fact was that people buy cookies for indulgence. I think when you focused too much on the healthy aspect of an indulgent category, you're going to lose a lot of opportunity with consumers. And when we took a step back and said, we're a cookie, we should stand for something exciting and fun and delicious first, and our healthy benefits as a secondary supplemental benefit to our cookie and our brand, that's when we honed in on our positioning the best.
And then talk a little bit about the visual process. How do you take this sort of emotional oomph that you've come up with here, the brand pillars that you've created? So we're talking about like all the same stuff that you know, you've gone through this. You've gone through this process. It's arduous. It takes a long time. It's a lot of you. It's a lot of, you know, co-founders. It's a lot of the audience, the product. How do you take that and translate it into strong visuals?
So the most important thing there is to have a very tight vision and strategy, which will translate into visual design. For example, if you want to stand for something traditional or convey strength, you'll want a serif type of font. If you want to stand for something more playful and modern, you'll want a sans serif type of font. If your tones are going to be darker and warmer, that'll stand for something more earthy, as opposed to something more flavorful, which is where you would lean more into bright. Just as important is the actual physical product itself, understanding the size of the pack, the weight, how much air you want in the pack. If you're going to have a K seal or a different type of steel to stand up higher, if you want a matte finish versus a glossy finish, you really have to think through all elements of the brand and where the brand will be lying in a physical space to construct a full 360 design.
And we're looking at your product, and looking at the product, how did you decide what the hierarchy would be on the packaging, and what was the most important thing for someone to see first?
Great question, Mike.
Because you're trying to drive trial with that package.
Great question,
You've got like
Mike.
5 seconds to get somebody to pick that thing up.
Great question. So the, as you said, you only have a couple seconds, and that comes back to the positioning. If you want to stand for healthy first, that'll drive your hierarchy. If you want to stand for tasty first, that'll drive your hierarchy. We wanted to make sure that the brand was first, the category was second, which was cookies, and then our flavor and what we stood for was third.
As a new brand, you chose to say, our brand is more important than the fact that this is a cookie. Why did you choose that?
Well, the cookie category is really crowded, but winners in the category don't stand for more than just a cookie. If you think about Oreo, they're not saying Oreo cookies, or if you think about, so a lot of these,
people also know what a frickin' cookie is at this point. You know, they know what to expect.
I think so.
It's not a lot of education to say this is a cookie. The education comes from it's a better for you cookie.
I think so, but I also think that you, in this fragmented category, have to stand for just more than just health, more than just a cookie, which is why we tried to stand for fun, flavor, and excitement in our packaging.
Now, you've done some pretty interesting licensing here. You talked about being a better for you brand, you know, and you've done some Grateful Dead cookies. Talk to me about that, how you feel like that fits into the brand, and how does that resonate with your audience?
Sure. Well, we just formed a partnership with the Grateful Dead. They're on tour right now. John Mayer is their lead singer while they're on tour with Dead & Company, and they're touring the country. Well, we were looking for a partner. We wanted someone on a platform that resonated with our consumers, that drove awareness for us, and that shared our values. So we looked across platforms, not just music. We looked at movies, we looked at sports, we looked at gaming, we looked at theme parks, looked at other cultural events, and we honed in on music. Music because it brings people together, it drives empathy, and it's also creative, similar to what our brand does and what really food and cookies do. In looking at our top 3 partners, we really like the Grateful Dead because they're very relevant, they have a very broad following, and frankly, with John Mayer as their frontman, they're catering to a super young, modern audience, which is exactly who we want to drive awareness to.
Hey, you rarely see a brand able to reinvent themselves like that. You know, a lot of bands like, you know, Hendrix, for instance, resonates with every generation. I think the Dead do to an extent too, but they figured out a way to double down on it, and so you are too.
Exactly right, and because of the way that they have been able to stay relevant, we couldn't have asked for a better partner, especially while they're on tour this summer. So we have these awesome Grateful Dead packaged cookies, and we're excited to launch them on the 4th of July.
Well, what's next for Thinsters? I mean, you've got this great new brand. You've got this partnership with the Grateful Dead, kick-ass packaging, delicious product. What's next?
We've got some really exciting things coming out later this year, both in our flavors and our formats. And what's next for us is to hopefully cater to more individuals. We want more people to try Thinsters, to love our brand as much as we do, and hopefully aspire to eat a little bit healthier while they enjoy cookies.
I enjoyed your cookies. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much for coming on the show, Kevin. It was great having you.